Okay, so let's attempt at a more successful incursion into this Heidegger's reading of Nietzsche's Will to Power. So I noticed, as I frequently make these little mistakes, but I think it doesn't really matter for anyone who's seriously studying Nietzsche, because you're going to look at all these texts yourself anyway, so what's the difference? And then you'll see where it said things that are false. But I noticed that, Heidegger does mention Nietzsche's sister when he's in his sort of electively thorough sorting through the justification for why Will to Power, though it wasn't published in Nietzsche's lifetime, should be considered as some way bona fide Nietzsche, because not as just notes. And then one thing he's saying is some of these aphorisms are totally complete, self-contained statements, and that the thing is, I mean, he doesn't state it exactly like this, but you could see for yourself if you read, but it's like that a selection has been made, and several selections have been made and written down and said, these are the ones that I'm going to put all together and complete it work when I get there. But then, of course, Nietzsche went insane for sort of the French mentality. I think they would say, I mean, I'm not exactly making a joke, like as though we're going to the Moulin Rouge and I'm trying to show you the bared thigh of a dancer or something to amuse you. But the French way of thinking, they think, oh yeah, Nietzsche had syphilis, therefore he went crazy, therefore there were malfunctions in the brain. Okay, the French tried to introduce a 10-month year because they thought it was more rational to use like the decimal system. It's more rational somehow. This really is kind of, in the French way of thinking, we get this more materialist way of thinking. That's my experience with this École Normale Supérieure people. And of course they controlled the whole education in France, and then you see a lovely exposition of that in the books by Wellenbeck. I think especially still interesting is the one on submission. That's an awesome piece of literature. It shows so clearly what the issue of immigration is. We have this case in South Africa, the case of a small group that was there for 500 years. Suddenly there's a sudden onslaught, as the flip that's been switched somewhere in the American anthropology departments or whatever, and then it gets out to the Democratic Party or whatever, and then it's suddenly the Afrikaners are sheer evil. Elon Musk is sheer evil, and it's obvious to them, and they forget that the Afrikaners were there for 500 years and that they weren't simply colonists committing ceaselessly and perpetually committing, ghastly acts against the rightful the rightful owners of that place, of that ground. I was searching for the word autochthonous somehow, as though but in speaking of people being autochthonous, it's somehow applying to classical law or something, and then we'll be accused of doing something else wrong. But anyway, I just tried to give the most vernacular version, I suppose. Somehow they were there first, and then here comes the Afrikaners, enslaves them. Here comes Elon Musk, starts calling them some kind of, there's somehow an Afrikaner version of the N-word, and so on, without actually looking at the whole thing. There's innumerable multitudes of people acted on the notion that this is what has happened. in the same way something like that, this type of problem carries over to all these problems of immigration, of the possibility of the strain of the so-called liberal democracy instead of the normal democracy. So I think that's one thing I would have raised probably on the Lucy Hayes, legendary Lucy Hayes podcast, if I had thought of it, is one thing Dugan is concerned with is could be expressed at least from the most sort of the way people talk about it now, most commonly, from the perspective of the distinction between sheer majoritarianism. It's often said, Putin actually does have the mandate of the people, pretty much. Just no matter how authoritarian he's said to be, it's true. Well, let's just pretend that's without further qualification. Just as a example, maybe true, maybe a true example, maybe not a true example of what it would mean to have sheer majoritarian democracy, rather than the aristocratic type of democracy called the liberal democracy. So, as associated with sort of conservative people like de Tocqueville. So, I mean, de Tocqueville thinks there should be something like a aristocratic democracy, which says I'm going to protect all the minorities against the tyranny of the majority, as the American founders put it all the time, the tyranny of the majority. The aristocratic democracy means, I think Madison called that something like mitigated democracy or some bizarre term, but it's really the attempt to prevent the tyranny of the majority from something like the Nazi Germany, because I think I'm constantly being told this. I don't know. I kind of looked it up, but I'm never quite sure. It's like supposedly Jews were like 0.5% of the population in the entity that were called by the exonym Germany at the time of the death camps and so on. At the time of this claim that Posner claims in Poland, these claims made that by the SS that I think by Himmler, and I can't remember, that even though it's the SS had I think not just so much the SS, but whichever elements of the former I think it's called like Reichswehr or something. The former army as it was before and under the the regime prior to Hitler, under Hindenburg and so on, and his generals. Which actually, again, it's very strange how these things are so dominant, so powerful. It's like I hear even from Fukuyama, I heard this, and I think it's actually just false. Is this notion that the Night of Long Knives was the moment when Hitler consolidated power. That's simply false. Actually, what Hitler was doing is like he made a deal with Hindenburg and Hindenburg's generals to parse back the SS, because they were parse back his own forces, or the SA, the Abteilung. Because what he was saying is, look, I'm going to give you guys, you generals, and you old man Hindenburg probably wasn't. I guess, I don't know, but I guess Hindenburg probably was. Hindenburg didn't like Hitler, I know that, because Hitler was just an enlisted man, and maybe because he's Austrian, I don't know. I think basically because it's just, why is this enlisted man trying to talk to me this way? But I think Hindenburg probably wasn't really in power. I think his main generals were. And then they cut a deal and they said, listen, give us a sign that that you're not going to become a dictator. Give us a sign that the German Reichswehr, the army, is the real army. Because we, the generals, we're not going to be, it's not like the case of in 2014 when that Yatsenyuk, when that American trained guy Yatsenyuk was in DC since like 2006 getting trained. I think 2005, 2006 getting trained to take this role. We're not going to like be scared out like Yanukovych was by these threats of the Stepan Bandera people, like the Stepan Bandera people, which sort of are like Hitler, right? Sort of the Azov Brigade and all those other things. And named a bunch of, there's a bunch of streets in Kiev named after Stepan Bandera and all this stuff. So it wasn't, so we're talking basically at the same level as what was happening in Germany in 1933. There was unclarity sort of about who's in charge. And then, Yanukovych got freaked out. He said, oh, the Azovs are threatening to murder me, so I'm gonna cut out. And then that Victoria Nuland discussion, what she's saying is like, she doesn't know yet that Yanukovych has fled. So she's saying like, let's try to, but she's confident that he's going to end up he's going to be pushed out. But she's saying, let's sort of oil this thing with a deal between him and Yats, as she's calling Yatsenyuk, their trained guy that they've been giving all this support to. And actually the U.S. Congress, people are such conspiracy theorists, but it's so, almost in every case, it's unnecessary, because it's like the U.S. Congress passed a bunch of stuff and say, oh, let's help Yatsenyuk and let's help others of that we can sort of enroll and who want to join the club. And then Victoria Nuland saying, well, he's thinking of talking to the guy from the National Socialist Azov people. He's thinking of talking to this other guy, but let's make sure he talks to Yats. But then that doesn't have to happen because he freaks out because he thinks that the Azovs are actually going to storm in and murder him. So, and then when he's gone, as soon as he leaves, because he's fearing for his life, the Americans seize upon the moment and say, now hold your, this is the time. It's like, now, do they actually order him? Probably, I'm saying it's even worse than that. They're just sitting there like waiting for something to happen that they like, and then they'll suddenly declare it the truth. They don't even have to intervene so much in a lot of cases. They intervene by helping, encouragement, flooding money in one way or another. They can't do it directly because there's laws against it, but they can promote democracy lawfully because they actually think it's good, or which is to say liberal democracy, as we're just talking about, the so-called aristocratic. They can, aristocratic democracy, de Tocqueville democracy. They can promote legally, which they're doing. And so some kind of environment like that, I think. This is the same type of political and violent environment with different factions and such as 1933. And then, Hitler says, okay, this Project Hummingbird, we'll remove the leader of the SA as a token, showing you generals that we're not trying to take over. We're not trying to take full control. That's what happened. I don't know why. So we actually have almost universally a false account of the Night of Long Knives and what it was about. I think even in Mishima's play, My Friend Hitler, this is wrongly understood. Um, maybe. Although in that play they have the industrialist in there and all that stuff. But okay, so let's try to go further into how Mishima versus Nietzsche on this point of that Mishima has a philosophy which amounts to a kind of almost what Fukuyama has called the defensive modernization philosophy, where the idea is from about it's from modern Japan. The idea is that there has to be, well, modern, I don't know, maybe it's from like 500 years ago, let's say, but it's sort of kind of ushers in the modern era, where to say our philosophy has to be a negotiation between action and theory. It can't get too lost in theory. And this is adopted by some of the Edo era leaders. But just to say that this philosophic attitude, again, we could see it directly in the political movement. In this case, in the case we're looking at now, it's this aristocratic democracy is good. And aristocratic democracy goes hand in hand with so-called free enterprise system. I mean, remembering that we're pretty Fordist, there's different things happening, but nonetheless, the necessary, mutatis mutandis, necessary changes being made, we get a kind of aristocratic rather than majoritarian view. And this view says we have the truth, so therefore we're allowed to do this. And so in a way it's not, there's absolutely nothing sort of hidden there. It's totally, it's just who they are. I mean, I think this is often understood by maybe George Samueli or so on the gaggle, and maybe partially I've become more conscious of it through watching the gaggle, which however of course is it's sort of a double vision in a way, because it's sort of like here's voices that are consonant with the Russian point of view and with what Russia's message, what the message Russia wants to send out. But then it's sort of like these people have this view. On the whole, they have that view already, and so that Russia collects people that have a view that's congenial to it to then be a megaphone for its position. So and part of that position is this situation where it doesn't require the reason why one would then say, oh, these people are evil, or Robert Kagan is evil, would partially be because you can't take a neutral stance. So if you're sort of decided you have the Schmittian enemyship and you're Dugan, then you have to regard them as evil because you have to hate and want to extinguish. I mean, hate means to want them to be extinguished, to go away. Hate can be cold. It could be rational. It's just that the ultimate aim, just as in after 2014, then the Ukrainians put into the constitution the aspiration to join NATO as a cold-written fait accompli, as a sang-froid, leaning, smoking a cigarette, fait accompli. But it's nonetheless, it's still an act. I mean, it's still their action is still, they're still active in that, in performing that. So now let's try to get to what I wanted to get to initially with Nietzsche. After sort of, I use the word metonymy just sort of to mean a complex transfer of meaning, not just one for one like a metaphor, but complex. I don't use it. I know the other meaning is something like a part for a whole, all hands on deck or something, but I use it more in a just to mean a complex transfer of meaning. So this metonymic link between everything I've just said should sort of link up to the view that Nietzsche's so here's what I want to thematize, and then that will be actually accomplished. Something will be accomplished, and that is Nietzsche's challenged Draco, who came in at 600 BC, and who I use to symbolize the beginning of mens rea, or putting all the attention on mental states and motive and intention and guilt and innocence based on this type of analysis in the absence of a plea of insanity, or in the absence of something that makes him no longer a legal person, or at least, I suppose that's not exactly accurate. They'd still be no longer a legal person whose motives are can be taken into account. Still a legal person insofar as they're being handled by the legal system and might be put in an insane asylum or something. But so Draco, I use as the first moment this came in. It sort of links up to the Vindicta moment ending. So Vindicta, or the Latin for vendetta, ending, and the legal apparatus coming in. It also indicates a general juxtaposition with something like eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. In the sort of Babylonian exile incursion into the Hebrew Bible, this same strict liability in modern terms. So Nietzsche is looking at it, saying, if we notice that sometimes there's spontaneous action. So again, Fukuyama is totally mistaken when he talks about the juxtaposition of inner and outer, and that there's this obsession with the inner person, and that's why we have LGBTQ plus or something. But in this context, what we're talking about is spontaneous autonomy, Kantian autonomy, this totally free, spontaneous action, as against an action either passionate, meaning pushed by the forces of nature, which could include also, again, this is why Zizek's stupid pornography thing, like if someone has lust, if they're lusting after you, and Zizek likes to show women with lust in his class in Switzerland, and then say, oh look, it's subjective, she has lust. That's what pornography is showing, the lust of the female. It's not objectifying them, it's subjective. But this kind of subjectivity is a Cartesian, post-Cartesian way of thinking. Zizek doesn't understand this. So if the Catholics say they're objectifying women, or what they're saying is, if they show them as having lust, that's a passion. That's something sort of instinctively, naturally grasping them, rather than them having the passion in the right circumstances, and not misusing it, and regulating it by reason. So there's these two sort of notions, and yeah, it becomes a question already in Kant, and then more so in Hegel, like, how does it happen that this thinking about things and regulating things that way, and the instincts or the impulse or the Trieb nach Unendlichkeit, as the Romantics start to call it, the infinity drive. How these things go together, and how there could be a moment of the pure spontaneity. So, for instance, that somebody would fix their will and say, I'm just going to walk by that sweet shop, and I'm not going to go in and buy the this candies, the special Turkish candies or something with the powdered sugar on them. But then suddenly, when they're right there, they dart in, and they're already enjoying greetings with the person, at the counter or something, and they're already, next thing you know, they have these green squares with the almonds or whatever in them, and so on. And then, so it's like, certainly there is spontaneous action. That's clear. But then the question is, how is it that so-called reason or thought is intervening into this, and how much is there also this other thing, like just the so-called stable natural instincts and so on and so forth. And then this question of the whole, once you kind of confuse it and fuse it together like that, Nietzsche's saying, isn't it that Draco just pulled some crazy stuff out of the celebration of the Bacchae, of the Dionysian orgies, and cast them into some stone tablets, and then can't there be other reevaluations of these values? Are they really so much unmovable as you're pretending? So this is a sort of Gotterdammerung that Nietzsche's getting at, the Gotterdammerung or the Ragnarok. I think Gotterdammerung is just the German translation of Ragnarok. And which, by the way, could mean not the twilight, but the dawn of the gods, the dawn of the idols. And that's exactly what Nietzsche means. It means is Dämmerung. Dämmerung can mean the dawn. It just means it means the twilight in the sense that you don't specify dawn or dusk. In this we have something like this so-called Stimmhammerung. So this philosophizing with the hammer is actually the tuning hammer, this very polite little tuning hammer. It's just knocking at each of the idols, each of the forms, to see, the paintings of George Braque, the films of Kristen Stewart, the works of Mary Kondo in terms of decluttering. The different forms, there's many different forms, and then he kind of, tink, 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 tests to see sort of the depths of these forms. Is there something Veldung, or is there something to wield there? Is there something great in this Stille Grosse? Is there some kind of grand style to be found here? So this is sort of the testing we should consider as something a little bit like deconstruction.